Hi, welcome to BariNation, where we support the bariatric community with humor, humility, and honesty.
You've just tuned into a podcast that welcomes you into a community, a resource center, and a safe place that powers your journey towards personal wellness.
Our goal is you leave us today feeling hopeful, inspired, and ready to live your best bariatric life.
Hi, welcome to the BariNation Podcast. Today we're going to talk about a subject that sometimes goes unsaid: addiction after bariatric surgery. We are joined by an addiction therapist, Sarah Smith, who's also an expert in the BariNation community. And today she is going to talk to us, teach us about process addiction, what we need to be on the lookout for, why it's a little bit more prevalent after bariatric surgery, and what we can do about it. So before we dive into this conversation, Sarah, will you take a moment and introduce yourself to the people that maybe haven't met you before?
Sure. So like April said, my name is Sarah Smith. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor in Oklahoma. I've been in the field for, pretty close to 20 years now. I'm in Florida and I'm working on getting my LCSW because the states don't play nice with each other, but I have been doing this work for quite some time, and I'm also a bariatric patient. And so when I was going through my journey, I started noticing the people in the support groups that I was attending through my surgical center sounded a lot like my clients, but they were talking about food. And that led me to doing a lot of research. And then, when you guys launched BariNation, I was like, hey, we have to start talking about this inside the community. And it has been actually one of my favorite groups to host, even in my, outside of my day job, because it really has been an opportunity of bringing people together and giving them the information and the support that they need to get on a recovery journey after surgery.
Absolutely. And we are the first to say there is no shame when it comes to struggling with these things. I myself even experienced a moment of struggle when it comes to alcohol after my bariatric journey. We have quite a few members of BariNation who are sober or who are looking to get sober because the numbers can be a little bit staggering. And we're going to share some research linked here in the show notes. But the research is showing that depending on surgery, you have up to a 30% increased risk of transfer addiction, process addiction after bariatric surgery. So if you are experiencing that, you are not alone. There's no shame in it. We are here to help you understand what those kind of red flags could be. And Sarah's going to talk to us about what we can do if we're noticing those things. So let's just get right to it. Sarah, what is process addiction?
Sure. Well, process addiction is really just another way to describe what you hear mostly in the community is called transfer addiction. But it is really when someone is substituting one addiction. So, for example, they may have been using food in an addictive way prior to surgery. You are physically removing your ability to do that when you have bariatric surgery. A lot of people are unaware that that's how they were using food prior to having bariatric surgery. So they're not prepared for that loss that they're experiencing, and they will shift it to another behavior. So whether that is excessive alcohol and drug use, excessive shopping, gambling, it can really just be any compulsive behavior that is filling that void that you're losing with food. One of the things that is just mind-blowing to people is like, it can be working out. And so when we think about, really getting pushed into the gym and pushing ourselves into the gym post-surgery, but when you realize that that's starting to take over things and you're starting to have a lot of guilt related to not being in the gym when you had a valid reason, like an injury, you're working out on top of injuries and things like that. That's when you might be aware that it is becoming more of a process addiction.
So when you're talking about these process addictions, it's not necessarily kind of those vices that we're thinking about. It can even be things that are healthy to a point that we take to excess and it becomes unhealthy.
Yep. Anything that you begin doing where it becomes compulsive and you're noticing emotions tied to that behavior. So you're going to be experiencing shame and guilt, either over the fact that you're doing the behavior or over your inability to do the behavior. So it's going to become very emotionally charged for you.
So what are those things that people can be on the lookout for if they're listening to this and they're going, oh, I wonder if I'm kind of stepping in the direction of this process addiction?
Sure. One of the things that you hear a lot is people that were never really drinkers before surgery. That's a key phrase is, I was never really a drinker. To me, that's saying, okay, now you think you are. So, why? How has your consumption changed? What's going on with your alcohol consumption? The same thing with, medical marijuana is huge across the country. So it was kind of the same thing. I never really smoked before, or people would say they'd never taken an edible before, things like that. And then it could also be, the feeling that I need this thing to manage my emotions. So you have a bad day and you're stopping at the store and, purchasing something because that new dress or that new top makes you feel really good. And that's how you're dealing with your stress. And if you pause and think about, well, how did I deal with the stress before? It was probably a favorite meal, a favorite drink, stopping at Starbucks. Like, I remember Starbucks being a huge reward for me. Like, if I was having a crappy day at work, I was like, oh, I deserve this Starbucks. And so we're losing the ability to do a lot of that. So we're adding other things in there. And then you're also going to look for escalating negative consequences. So, you might be a person that never charged, I don't know, like items under $100. Like you may have had some rule related to your spending with like when you were going to put things on credit versus, making yourself save to pay for cash. A lot of people will say like, my credit cards are for large purchases. And the next thing you know, you're charging shoes, you're charging a dress, you're charging makeup and things that, you'd always made yourself like wait until you could afford to purchase. And then it is also going to be tied to that, I deserve it. This is going to make me feel good.
Jason, Nat, have you guys experienced this along your bariatric journey? Have you seen this escalation of certain behaviors?
I guess you could say my escalation for purchasing shoes, but I've always kind of been that way. So I don't know if I could attribute it to that because I don't have to be having a bad day to buy shoes. So I'm just saying, like, I'm just throwing it out there. I think mine may be more travel. I'm so excited, like, I'm just so jazzed, like, to go places now that I never cared to do, like, before, that I will try to find ways to justify traveling to places, even when it would put a strain on what we're, like, Sarah and I are trying to do. So she has to reel me back in a lot of times on stuff like that because I'm like, nope, we can do it. We can press it. Like, we can just do this and do that. And she'll have to be like, realistically, how? Because for a minute, because she likes to travel too. So for a minute, she may be like, I mean, we probably could. And then she'll have to turn back around and be like, but not like, this is why we can't do that. So, yeah.
But why I think that example is so powerful is, right, this process addiction, this learning to deal with our emotions in new ways is not all related to these negative things. And that's a really great example, right? Because if you're, Sarah, you're saying like, it's this escalation of excess and it's this negative consequence. There can be negative consequences for doing good, fun things. It's just, okay. Now, what about you?
Definitely, I would say, I mean, I've partaken in like marijuana and things like that prior to surgery. But I would say for sure I've used it more for sleep. I would say like, oh, to wind down, I need this. I need it. And when I don't have it, I feel stressed. I feel like my routine is off, those types of things. And I've since gotten a lot better with that, and retrained my sleep. But there was definitely a period of time post-surgery where I was like more reliant on that because I couldn't eat in the way that I did before, for sure.
I think all four of us on the screen have experienced this escalation in certain behaviors. And I mean, truly, thank goodness we're closely connected to one another, but we're very closely connected in BariNation. And we've been able to go to those safe places and go, I've been noticing this. And we're not met with shame and guilt. We're met with curiosity and with help and with this safe place to kind of talk it through. So, Sarah, what do you recommend people do if they're thinking, I might be traveling in this direction? What would be the next steps?
You can really start. Anywhere. There's multiple places to start, right? You could just talk to your surgeon about it. I remember one of my, last follow-ups with my surgeon, it was kind of like, how are things going with you? And I said, I still have a little bit disordered eating happening. And he laughed at me, I think just because I was that, transparent about it. But, starting at your surgeon's office, if you're familiar with a therapist in your area, of course, you could, seek out a therapist and start therapy to have the conversation. I would try to find somebody that is familiar with addiction, because they are going to be looking for things that are a little bit different than a therapist that really specializes in mental health. There's some things around like isolation, hiding habits that would be a warning sign for us. And then, definitely within our BariNation community, I mentioned in the beginning, I do a support group for people that are experiencing transfer addiction every Monday at, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Mountain, 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So can't believe I figured that out, but.
And the wonderful thing about exploring what you're maybe going through in BariNation is our support groups are confidential. So they're never recorded. What's shared in those groups remains in those groups. And we strive to ensure member safety at all levels. So if you think that this might be something that you are struggling with and you don't know where to turn, we invite you to join us in BariNation. And a vast majority of all of the supports that we offer in our community are sober opportunities. So you're not going to see people engaging in any type of drinking activities, no, we want to make sure that everybody feels welcome because we know the struggle can really be real. And Sarah, you have even worked on some on-demand educational content, right? That our members can tap into anytime they need or want it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really just some basic educational information. Where you can get a little bit more detail about the things we've talked about today, some more, definitions, things like that to really help you, kind of weigh what's going on with yourself and determine if, you do need to seek help.
I think that's the most important part, right? When you're experiencing something new and you're really worried because you know that it feels so different for you and you just don't know where to turn, you want to get that basic understanding of what is this? Could this be transfer addiction? Could this be process addiction? And that on-demand content that lives in BariNation is designed for exactly that. It is a way for you to toe dip into, could this be? And what is it? So that you can make the best informed decision for yourself. So if you are struggling with that, we invite you to join us in the community. It is there for you to get that support that you need. Sarah, what's the one thing you're hoping people are leaving this conversation with today?
I really hope that they leave understanding that, this early intervention is key. Like you don't want to wait until this becomes a problem. And, getting help is available and recovery is possible. And we are definitely here for you in BariNation.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for sharing your expertise in this. I mean, we know how challenging it is. And we're just so thankful that not only do you offer, your help and support from the patient perspective, but from that professional perspective. It's just amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
That wraps up another empowering episode of the BariNation Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, keep the conversation going by joining the BariNation membership community, where you can attend live support events, access on-demand resources, and find a caring community.
Join us at barination.mn.co. If you found this podcast valuable, help us produce it by becoming a $5 monthly supporter at BariNationPodcast.com.
And just remember, at the end of the day, you've got this, we've got you, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.